Hello, my dear students and the rest of the learners. Welcome to part 35 of a 41-part series of tutorials in Fundamentals of Object-Oriented Programming in Java. In this tutorial, we are going to be looking at what we call the Java constructors. My name is MemGM, or you can simply call me Emily Swap. A constructor in Java is a special method that is used to initialize objects. The constructor is called when an object of a class is created. It can be used to set initial values for object attributes. A constructor is therefore a method that is used to create constructor names for an instance or object of a class and to assign initial values to instance variables. A constructor declaration looks just like a method definition, except that it must have the same name as the name of the class, and it cannot declare a result type. Unlike the class-level variables and methods of a class, constructors are not considered members of the class. Therefore, they are not inherited by a class's subclasses. Access to constructors is governed by the access modifiers, which are public and private. A constructor cannot return a value, and therefore, its declaration cannot include a return type. This is because they cannot return values, and therefore, constructors cannot be invoked by a regular method invocation. Instead, constructors are invoked as part of an instance creation expression when instance objects are created. An instance creation expression involves the keyword new followed by the constructor invocation, and therefore, Java automatically provides a default constructor when a class does not contain a constructor. The default constructor's role is simply to create an instance or an object of that class, and therefore, this method does not take any parameters. In terms of what it does, the default constructor for a class would be equivalent to a public constructor method with an empty body. A constructor and its class have the same name, but the first takes no parameters, whereas the second takes the parameters. In other words, a constructor does not take parameters, but a class name, but a class can take parameters. A constructor method is therefore invoked only as part of a new expression when an instance object is first created. When we invoke a method that returns a value, the invocation expression takes on or is replaced by the value that is returned. We can use a value returned by a method call the same way we use a literal value of the same type. And therefore, it can be assigned to variables, be part of a numerical expression, or be an argument of another method. When we in Java, or when we are working in Java, methods that return a value can simply be called without making use of the value returned. This may be useful, especially when you want to perform certain activities. It may be useful to do if the method changes the state of instance variables or sends a message to another object or an output device. Therefore, the two rules for creating a constructor are: the name of the constructor should be the same name as the name of the class. A Java constructor must not have a return type. If a class doesn't have a constructor, the Java compiler automatically creates a default constructor during runtime. The default constructor initializes instance variables with default values. For example, the int variable will be initialized to 0. A constructor, therefore, cannot be abstract, nor can it be static or final. a constructor can be overloaded, but it cannot be overwritten. Unlike Java methods, a constructor has the same name as that of the class and does not have any return type. Therefore, the three types of constructors in Java are no argument constructor, parameterized constructor, and default constructor. I repeat that the three types of constructors in Java are the no-arg constructor, the parameterized constructor, and default constructor. What's the difference of these? Let's look at each of them at a time. We begin with Java no-argument constructors. Now, similar to methods, a Java constructor may or may not have any parameters or arguments. If a constructor does not accept any parameters, it is known as a no-argument constructor. For example, private constructor, and then the body of the constructor. So if we have the definition private constructor followed by the body of the constructor, then we can say that this is a no-argument constructor because there are no parameters enclosed within the parentheses. So the following is an example of a program that implements a no-argument constructor. So the comment is program for adding two numbers using a no-argument constructor. The name of the package is add numbers. Import the java.atin.scanner. Then the class is add numbers. We have some data member who is result of type integer. And then the constructor without any parameter is private and numbers. And then this constructor has some members or data members who are num1 and num2 of type integer. And we have the declaration or definition of input, which is of type scanner. And then we read values or we read the numbers. We read the numbers where we are prompting the user to enter the first name, and then we read the value or the name and enter it or save it or assign it in the data member called num1. Then we prompt the user to enter a second number, and that number is keyed in and assigned into the memory called num2. From there, we request the compiler to add or processor to add the content in memory location called num1 to that of memory location called num2 and assign the results in the memory location or data member called result. And we end that definition at that point. Then we go to the main section of the program. The main method, which is main. Here, we have a call statement for the constructor that has no parameters. So first, we define a new object. We define an object called addNumbers of type addNumbers. From there, we are able to invoke the method called result. We are able to invoke the method called result through addNumbers. And therefore, the statement which is displayed on the screen is the sum of the two numbers entered is addNumbers.result, where result is a data member who we have already seen is a member of the method called addNumbers, which is a constructor. So when we invoke this statement here, when we invoke this statement, or we write this statement on the screen, or in the screen, that the sum of the two numbers entered is, once the last section is encountered, it is telling the compiler or the translator, go to a member called result in the class whose object is add numbers object. Pick the value which is there and write it out on the screen. So the value will be written out, and therefore the statement will read as follows. If what is in result is, for example, 150, so it will read, the sum of the two numbers entered is 150. And that becomes the end of that program. So my dear students and the rest of the learners, you can see that the name of our class here is add numbers. But within that class, we have a constructor who is called add numbers. So the name of the constructor is similar to the name of the class. So if you have a method with the same name as the name of the class in which that method is defined, then that method is said to be a constructor. And therefore, the rest of the program remains just as we have been doing before. So that's how we implement a program. That's how we implement a program with a constructor that has no parameters. Next, let's look at the other one. The other one is what we call the parameterized constructor. Java parameterized constructor. What is a Java parameterized constructor? A Java constructor can also accept one or more parameters. Such constructors that are able to accept parameters is known as parameterized constructor or constructors with parameters. In the following example, we have created a constructor named add numbers, but it takes two parameters. So our program is, or the comment for this program is, program for adding numbers using a constructor with parameters. The name of our project or package is add numbers. Then we have import java.atil.scanner. The name of the class is add numbers. Then definition for this class is we have a member, and that's a member called result, who is of type integer. Then we have a constructor with the two parameters. This constructor is called add numbers. As you can see, the name of this method, which is a constructor, is similar to the name of the class in every manner. But this method called add numbers is receiving two values through the parameters, that is num1 parameter and num2 parameter, both of which are of type integer. And then what this constructor is doing is to add the two values received, and the result is assigned in the memory location or in the data member called result. And that's what that constructor is doing. So the constructor here is simply receiving two values, adding the two values, and assigning the value or the result or the total in the data member, or if you want, you can say local variable called result. So the value, the result is stored there. Then we go to the main method. Under the main method, we still have two variables, which are num1 and num2 of type integer. And then we are defining an object for the class. And the name of this object is add numbers object, which is of type and numbers. That is the name of the class. So we can create object for reading input as usual using the scanner. So we create an object called scan, which is going to be used in the process of reading values. And then when we are reading, we are requesting the compiler to display the text on the screen. Enter the first number, and then we read the value that will be entered using the method called nextInt, which is, of course, found from the file called scanner through the object scan. The value which is going to be read is assigned in the memory location of variable called num1. We then request the user to enter the second number, and the user types in a value which is read by the method called nextInt through the object called scan, and the value is assigned in the memory location called num2. From there, we can invoke our constructor by passing to it the two arguments, that is num1 and num2. How do you invoke that constructor? You invoke the constructor simply by defining an object called addNumbers of type addNumbers, and then we pass to it two arguments, that is num1 and num2. So whatever that is in the memory location called num1 and whatever that is in the memory location called num2 will be passed over to the method called addNumbers, the method called addNumbers of type class, and the name of the class is addNumbers. So the two numbers or two values will be passed over to the constructor through the addNumbers object. Then the next statement to be displayed is the sum of the two numbers, and that is, we now request the compiler to go and read. Remember, when this statement is executed, the two values will be passed over to this method here. So the two values will be received as num1 and num2. Then they will be added using this statement, and the result of the value or the answer will be assigned in the variable called result, or the member called result. And therefore, when we invoke result, or when we invoke the method called addNumbers through the object for the class called addNumbers, then we can be able to read the content of the member called result. So when this statement is invoked, the processor, the compiler, will go and read the value stored in the data member of the class which is manipulated by the object called addNumbers object. So it will go to that specific member of that specific class whose object is addNumbers object, read the value which is there, and display it at this point. And that's what that program will do. Let's now look at what we call the Java default constructor. Now, if we do not create any constructor, like the programs we have been doing under the object-oriented programming, and mostly in most of the programs that we have worked with in this series, in the set of series of these tutorials, you have noted that we didn't declare any constructor. So how has Java been working? Java has been creating what we call default constructor. So if we do not create any constructor, the Java compiler automatically creates a no-argument constructor during the execution of the program. You may not see it, but it is created. So the following is a sample program that adds two numbers using a default constructor. So the comment of the program is program using default constructor. The name of the project is addNumbers. And the next statement is java.atil.scanner, that is import java.atil.scanner. Then we define our class called addNumbers. And this addNumbers class has a data member of field called result, which is of type integer. And then we have the main method. The main method here is calling or invoking the default constructor. Now, the statement here, the statement we have is that we are declaring an object. We are declaring an object called addNumbers object, which is of the class called and numbers1, which is of the class called and numbers1. And then we are declaring two variables or two members who are num1 and num2, and they are of type integer. From there, we can create an object for reading input. As usual, the name of our object is input. So we can be able to prompt the user to enter first the number, the value is read, through the method called nextInt, through the object called input. Now, that value which is read is assigned in memory location called num1. Then the user is requested to enter the second number. The user keys in the value. It is read by the method called nextInt through the object called input, and that value is assigned in the memory location called num2. From there, we access the member called result through the object and numbers object. And as we access that member, we store in that member the sum of the values entered as num1 and as num2. And therefore, from there, we can be able to write out the result by displaying the statement, the sum of the two numbers entered is, and then we request the process to go and access the member called result, click the value from there, and display it on the screen. And our program simply ends at that point. And therefore, my dear students and the rest of the learners, we can decode this program. We can decode this program. The program we are going to code is, we want to code one that makes use of a constructor with the two parameters. So this is the program that I'm going to code so that you see how it will behave in our IDE. So we are going to copy this program, because only we have written the program, paste it in our IDE, we run it and see what we shall get. So what we are going to do, we are going to launch Eclipse IDE, and then we code our program. So let's initiate or load Eclipse. So we type Eclipse. As we type it, once you get it, you click on it and load it. Always remember that waiting is part of programming. Once you launch your IDE for coding Java programs, you need to wait for the program to load. So our IDE has been displayed. That is Java Eclipse IDE. We can now create a new project. Now this project, we are going to call it and numbers. And then you click on a finish. But as you can see, we are being told that we have another project with that name, because the name seems to be similar to another project, we can modify it ad intro. So we can have it as and numbers construct and numbers for constructor. And then we click on finish. And numbers constructor. Then we can create our new file. That's our new class. We point there, then we click on the class. You can see the name of the package is and numbers constructor. So we can use the same name, yeah, as the as and numbers constructor and numbers constructor. But this time round, the name begins with uppercase and numbers constructor and numbers constructor. Then, of course, include the public static void main string. Click finish. So this is our snippet. We can replace this. We can replace this text. You can replace this text, but remember, even if you have to type or retype this code, the name of the package must remain that way, and the name of the class must remain that way. So let's paste our program here that we have discussed. You can see the name of my package is add numbers. So I have to replace it here. So I will do away with this statement because already we have it here. So what I'll do, I'll just reorganize this text of mine. Remember, this is the program that we have discussed. I'll move that there. The package is a numbers constructor. Then the name of the class, this name of the class. Before that, let's have this import statement at its right position there. Then we have public class add numbers constructor. So we retain that. Public static void main string, we already have it. So we can remove this statement here because already we have it. We already have that code with us. And we cannot have two classes. So I'll remove this class from there. Let me also remove that brace. So public class add numbers constructor. Now, note that this is the member, and then the constructor is supposed to be the same as the name of the class. So I will copy this. I will copy this name and paste it here. That way, because we are talking about a constructor, and the name of a method which is a constructor is supposed to be the same as the name of the class in which it is defined. Then from there, we have the main method. Remember, it's always good to organize or indent your code nicely that way. So we have this method, which is a constructor performing the work of addition or adding numbers. Then we have our method, main method here. And this method has the declaration for the variables. But then there is this bit here. Now, this is object for the class. And therefore, this name, the name we use here, should be the same name as the name of the class. So the name of our class is a numbers constructor. So I'll copy that name and replace it or paste it here. So add numbers constructor is the name of the class, and the object is add numbers object. That's okay. Then we proceed. Create object for reading input. We read as usual. We enter values as usual, but then there is this statement here which has to be amended. So this is add numbers object equals, so this name here must be the name of the class. So we can paste the name of our constructor there. That is the name of the constructor of the class, which is also the same as the name of the method, the constructor method. The rest can remain. So we indent our program nicely that way. So we can now save our program and then we run it. Good. So my dear students and the rest of the learners, the most important point for you to remember is, just as I've said in the previous presentations, remember that the name of the package is the name of the project. So they must be similar. Then the name of the class, this name of the class is or should be the same as the name of the file. As you can see, add numbers constructor.java. And then when it comes to parameterized constructor, ensure that the name of your method, which is a constructor, is similar to the name of the class in which it is defined. And because it is a parameterized constructor, in other words, it is receiving two arguments which are received as parameters, then remember to enclose the parameters within the parentheses. And when you are creating an object, create an object that is accurate, an object for the class. So the name of the class must be consistent. So our program has executed, meaning it has no errors. That is syntax errors, and therefore being asked to enter the first number. So let me enter the first number as 56 and press enter. We are being asked for the second number. Remember, this is within the main method. So I can type, for example, I can type the second number as 56, or let me change that. Let me enter 23. Then you press enter. Now, what has happened? The main method has requested for the first value and the second value. But then, for us to get this sum, this statement which is reading, the sum of the two numbers entered is 79. The method which has done the computation is the constructor. So the values which have been entered, 56 and 23, that is this value and this one, have been passed over, have been sent to the constructor called add numbers constructor, which is this one. So the first value, 56, has been received as this parameter, and the second value, 23, has been received as this parameter. The two have been added, and the answer 79 has been stored in this member here called result. And therefore, when this statement is executed, the sum of the two numbers entered is this one here tells the processor, go to the class whose object is add numbers object, go and look or read the value in the member called result and display that value here on the screen. That's how it has been able to read 79. And therefore, my dear students and the rest of the learners, that's how a parameterized constructor. So that's how a constructor works. So if you have a constructor that is receiving parameters, that's how it works. And with that, my dear students, you can save your program. Always remember to save your program, in fact, before you run it, so that as you debug, as you make changes, you don't lose your program. So we can click on File, we close or end the task, and then we can click on File again, and then we can click on Exit. And with that, my dear students and the rest of the learners, we have come to the end of part 35 of this series. You can now proceed and listen as well as watch and practice on part 36 of the series, in which we are going to learn about what we call the Java nested classes. Congratulations, therefore, for learning part 35 of the fourth one, in which we have learned about Java constructors in fundamentals of object-oriented programming using Java. You can access the rest of the parts in the series, as well as other computer or ICT videos, by clicking or tapping on Emily's ICT YouTube channel below this video. To subscribe to this channel, tap on subscribe button below this video in YouTube if it's not currently reading as subscribed. For any further correspondence, kindly write it to us through the email emilyswap@gmail.com. Thank you very much for listening to me, and let's meet in part 36 of the series, and God bless.